The world watched in disbelief as fire lit the skies over Donbas. But what came next would rewrite the rules of modern warfare. September 25, 2025, Eastern Ukraine. The dawn was quiet, too quiet for a region that had become the heart of Europe's most dangerous battlefield. Beneath a pale orange sky, Ukrainian scouts detected something unusual on their forward radars. An armored column, massive in scale, advancing south through the mist. At first the reading seemed impossible. 87 tanks moving in tight formation, flanked by armored personnel carriers and mobile artillery. But what shocked Ukrainian commanders wasn't just the size, it was the origin. Among the Russian vehicles were unmistakable silhouettes of North Korean Chanmaho tanks, a design based on the Soviet T-62, but upgraded with reactive armor and digital targeting systems. Satellite confirmation soon followed. Pyongyang had delivered a batch of tanks to Moscow in August, and now, they were on the front lines of Donbas ready for their first major test. At 600 hours, Ukrainian command received the final verification. The tanks were advancing toward the small but strategically vital settlement of Lysychansk, a region that controlled the corridor between Donbas and Kharkiv. If the enemy broke through, it would open a direct route into the heart of eastern Ukraine. Inside a reinforced command center west of the front, Colonel Dmytro Ivanenko stood over the tactical map. The red markers representing the 87 tank formation were moving steadily. His staff reported their coordinates in real time, relayed by NATO reconnaissance drones circling far above. Ivanenko exhaled sharply. "They think they can overwhelm us with armor," he said. "Let them enter the valley. Once they cross that ridge, we close the gates." What the enemy didn't know was that Ukraine had turned the Lysychansk Valley into a kill zone, a carefully prepared trap designed over weeks in coordination with NATO advisors. Hidden artillery batteries, camouflage drone control posts, and precision-guided HIMARS launchers were already in position. The operation was codenamed Silent Net. At 0630, the first North Korean tank crested the ridge. Its diesel engine growled through the morning fog. Thermal sensors on Ukrainian drones locked on. Above the clouds, a US-made RQ-20 Puma drone transmitted live visuals to command. The footage showed a column stretching nearly 3 kilometers, perfectly aligned, perfectly exposed. Ivanenko nodded. "Let them come deeper," he said. "We wait for grid reference Charlie 17. Then we strike." The minutes crawled by. Ukrainian soldiers hidden in tree lines and abandoned farmhouses watched as the armored column rolled closer. Their fingers rested on triggers. The air smelled of diesel and damp soil. Over encrypted radio, NATO surveillance operators reported in from Poland and Romania, tracking everything from orbit to ground level. At 0700, the enemy reached the designated point. The trap was set. Ivanenko gave the command. "Execute Silent Net." The first volley came from a HIMARS launcher positioned 40 kilometers west. 6 rockets streaked into the morning sky, vanishing into low clouds before descending like thunder. The explosions were instantaneous, fireballs erupting in the middle of the column. 2 Chanmaho tanks were obliterated before their crews even understood what hit them. Seconds later, the second wave began. Turkish Bayraktar TB2 drones operating in pairs released precision MAM-L missiles onto the lead and rear tanks, cutting off the formation's escape routes. The valley became a cauldron of fire and smoke. Radio chatter from Russian and North Korean units turned chaotic. Their communications, intercepted by Ukrainian signals intelligence, revealed confusion and disbelief. "We're under attack from the sky. Where is our air cover?" one operator shouted in Russian. Another screamed coordinates that no longer existed, their entire platoon engulfed in flames. Ukrainian artillery crews worked in perfect synchronization, each shot calculated by NATO satellite data. The precision was surgical. Shells landed within 2 meters of target coordinates. The ground shook. At 0710, the first counterattack began. Russian BM-21 Grad launchers fired blindly into the fog, hoping to silence Ukrainian positions. But their rounds fell short, detonating harmlessly in open fields. Ukrainian radar systems, provided by Germany's IRIS-T defense network, jammed enemy targeting signals, rendering most of their counterfire useless. Meanwhile, on the front line, small Ukrainian drone teams advanced closer, flying palm-sized FPV kamikaze drones directly into tank hatches. On live feed, operators watched as the drones slipped under armor plates and detonated inside. It was warfare of the future, silent, precise, and devastating. By 0730, 23 tanks had been destroyed. The rest began maneuvering frantically, firing into the fog, trying to retreat. But the valley was sealed. Ukrainian forces had mined the northern exits and flooded the southern plain days earlier. The armored column was trapped. Inside one burning tank, a North Korean officer, Captain Ri Hyun-sok, attempted to radio command. Static filled the channel. Their GPS navigation was jammed. He could see the faint silhouettes of his comrades' vehicles exploding one after another. His tank's gunner shouted something, then a blinding light consumed them both. By 0745, HIMARS rockets launched again, this time guided by real-time laser designations from American reconnaissance drones flying at high altitude. Each impact struck with mathematical precision. A single rocket could wipe out an entire platoon. The air was filled with the echo of detonations rolling across the hills. In Kyiv, the Ukrainian General Staff watched live satellite feeds streamed through NATO's secure network. The operation was proceeding flawlessly. Defense analysts noted the uncanny efficiency, reminiscent of U.S. Navy doctrine, where every strike, every maneuver, was calculated to maximize effect with minimum exposure. A British advisor at the operations center murmured, "This is textbook naval discipline applied on land." Indeed, Ukraine had studied American coordination principles, decentralized command, precise timing, and respect for human lives. Even in victory, no random bombardments, no wasted firepower, only surgical strikes, each one justified by target verification. At Ordo 800, the surviving enemy vehicles tried one final breakout toward the east. But Ukrainian ATGM teams armed with Javelin and Stugna-P launchers awaited them from concealed positions. One by one, the tanks erupted as their ammunition cooked off. Then came silence. Only smoke remained, rising in tall black columns visible for miles. Birds circled above the valley that had become a graveyard of steel. At 8:30, Ukrainian infantry moved in cautiously to secure the area. They encountered dozens of surrendering soldiers, some Russian, others North Korean. Many were disoriented, their uniforms torn and faces covered in soot. Despite the destruction, Ukrainian troops treated them with dignity. Medics provided first aid to the wounded. Prisoners were given water and blankets. One Ukrainian sergeant, recalling the moment later, said, "We fought like warriors, but we treated them like humans. That's what separates us from them." By 0900 hours, the battle was officially over. 87 enemy tanks destroyed. Not a single Ukrainian armored vehicle lost. The kill zone had worked perfectly. Western analysts began calling it the one-hour war. In that brief window, Ukraine had demonstrated a fusion of modern technology and disciplined command unseen since the Gulf War. Footage from the battlefield, captured by drones, spread across the internet within hours. The world saw the scale of the destruction, rows of smoking wrecks stretching into the distance. Many viewers compared the precision and coordination to U.S. Navy strike operations in the Persian Gulf. That evening, President Zelensky addressed the nation. "Today," he said, "our defenders prove that freedom can think faster, strike smarter, and act with humanity. Strength and honor are not enemies. They are allies." Across Europe and North America, news outlets replayed the footage. Military experts praised the operation's strategic depth. "This was more than a battle," one retired U.S. admiral commented. "It was a demonstration of Western discipline translated into Ukrainian courage." But behind the victory lay a deeper story, one few outside the command knew. The preparation for Silent Net had begun weeks earlier, involving secret intelligence from NATO's Joint Operations Center in Germany. It required near-perfect coordination between Ukrainian ground forces, American intelligence satellites, and European drone logistics. The kill zone itself had been chosen after months of terrain analysis. The valley near Lysychansk offered a natural funnel, steep ridges on both sides, minimal cover, and narrow exits. Engineers had reinforced hidden trenches and placed decoy targets to mislead enemy scouts. Every meter of the battlefield had been mapped, simulated, and rehearsed. Even the timing of the North Korean tank's arrival wasn't coincidence. Ukrainian cyber units had intercepted logistical communications predicting the exact convoy route. When the first tank rolled out of the Russian staging area, Ukraine was already waiting. By sunset, cleanup teams moved through the wreckage. The smell of burnt fuel lingered. Among the ruins, Ukrainian soldiers found documents written in Korean, training manuals, tactical notes, even propaganda leaflets promising brotherhood through victory. They collected them carefully for intelligence analysis. As night fell, a gentle rain began to wash the ashes into the soil. The valley grew quiet again, lit only by the faint glow of smoldering metal. In Kyiv, Colonel Ivanenko sat alone in the command center, watching replay footage. The operation had been flawless, but he knew the war was far from over. He whispered softly, "Today we won the hour. Tomorrow they'll come again." And deep within the silence of the night, the world began to realize the fusion of Ukrainian resilience and Western precision had created something entirely new. Generation of soldiers who fought with both strength and conscience. To the U.S. Navy observers who studied the operation, it was more than inspiration. It was proof that discipline, technology, and humanity could coexist, even on the deadliest battlefield. As one American analyst summarized it, Ukraine just ran a naval strike playbook on land and made history. But this was only the beginning. Beyond the shattered valley, new intelligence hinted that Russia and North Korea were planning retaliation, something larger, more dangerous, and far more unpredictable. The next phase of the war was about to begin. The valley of Lysychansk was still smoldering when new intelligence began to flow in. Satellite imagery revealed fresh armor columns forming north of Luhansk, hundreds of kilometers away, but unmistakably linked to the failed assault. This time, however, the buildup looked different. Russian logistics convoys were moving alongside transport trucks marked with North Korean symbols. Military analysts concluded that Pyongyang had doubled down, preparing to send not just tanks, but missile technicians and drone specialists. For Ukraine, the message was clear. The enemy hadn't learned defeat, it had learned anger. In the days following the battle, Ukrainian units rotated out of the kill zone. Engineers recovered wrecks for study, while intelligence officers combed through black boxes from destroyed tanks. Among the debris, they found encrypted drives containing tactical data, coordinates of planned staging areas and radio frequencies linked to Russian command posts. The findings were shared immediately with NATO intelligence centers in Poland and Germany. Within hours, American analysts had decrypted fragments of the data. What they discovered changed the tone of the entire war. The destroyed tanks had been only one spearhead of a much larger offensive. A second wave, codenamed Operation Iron Fist, was scheduled for October. Its objective, to overwhelm Ukraine's eastern defense line through sheer volume of armor and artillery. But the destruction of 87 tanks had exposed their strategy. The entire plan was now compromised. Inside the Pentagon, military advisors studied the operation in detail. Rear Admiral Thomas Wilkins, an expert in U.S. Navy strike doctrine, was among the first to review the footage. "The level of precision coordination here," he said, "reminds me of carrier operations. Every missile, every drone, every support system moved in harmony. That's how you win battles before they even start." In Kyiv, the morale was electric. Troops who had fought at Lysychansk were hailed as heroes. Western media called them the Silent Net Battalion. But amid the celebration, Ukraine's high command remained cautious. Victories on paper were one thing, sustaining them was another. Colonel Ivanenko, now promoted to brigadier, gathered his senior staff. "They'll strike back," he said quietly. "And when they do, it won't be tanks. It'll be something worse." His fears weren't misplaced. On October 3rd, reconnaissance drones detected unusual heat signatures in Donetsk Oblast, consistent with short-range ballistic missile launchers. Intercepted communications confirmed North Korean engineers were calibrating systems for a joint strike. The war was entering a new phase, where precision would decide survival. In response, NATO convened an emergency session in Brussels. Representatives from the US, Britain, and Poland discussed rapid support packages, anti-missile systems, surveillance aircraft, and extended cyber defense coverage. One directive stood out: to provide Ukraine with a strategic framework modeled on U.S. Navy carrier strike group tactics, layered defense, rapid mobility, and data fusion between units. The logic was simple. If Ukraine could coordinate its ground forces with the precision of a naval fleet, no enemy could overwhelm it through brute force. Training began immediately. Ukrainian commanders learned to think like naval captains, treating each brigade as a ship, each drone wing as an aircraft squadron, and each artillery battery as a missile deck. It was an unprecedented transformation, a land army thinking like a sea power. Meanwhile, inside Russia, the failure at Lysychansk had sparked quiet outrage. Leaked reports from Moscow suggested the Kremlin blamed North Korean hardware for the debacle. Obsolete junk, one general reportedly said. But Pyongyang saw things differently. They believed the problem wasn't their equipment, it was the enemy's new tactics. On October 10th, a North Korean military delegation arrived in Moscow. The two sides discussed a joint reprisal operation. Plans were drawn for a hybrid assault combining long-range missiles, kamikaze drones, and cyber-sabotage against Ukrainian radar systems. The date was set, October 22nd. Ukraine didn't know the details, but it didn't have to. Western intelligence was already watching. At Oru 200 on October 21st, a U.S. Navy reconnaissance aircraft, the P-8A Poseidon, patrolled the Black Sea. Its sensors picked up encrypted bursts of radio traffic between Russian command posts in Rostov and satellite uplinks near Pyongyang. Analysts traced the signals back to drone staging areas east of Donbas. The message was unmistakable. The enemy was preparing a synchronized strike. The information was relayed to Kyiv within minutes. Colonel Ivanenko, now leading Ukraine's Eastern Defense Command, listened carefully as the report played through. He didn't panic. He simply said, "Then we strike first." By dawn, Ukraine's forces were already repositioning. HIMARS launchers were hidden in abandoned warehouses, anti-drone lasers powered up, and air defense batteries calibrated. Every movement was timed, every order cross-checked. It was a symphony of discipline, a reflection of the U.S. Navy's doctrine of perfect timing, no wasted motion. At 600 hours on October 22nd, the sky above Donetsk erupted with movement. Russian and North Korean drones swarmed westward, hundreds of them, flying low to avoid radar. For a moment, it looked overwhelming, but then, one by one, they began to vanish from the screen. American-made jamming systems, delivered just days earlier, had gone live. The drone's GPS systems failed mid-flight. Some crashed into each other, others spiraled to the ground harmlessly. From the western hills, Ukrainian artillery opened fire. HIMARS rockets screamed overhead, guided by infrared targeting from orbit. Each launch was precise, deliberate. Within minutes, the staging area from which the enemy had launched their attack was in flames. By Or 6:30, the second phase began. Ukrainian cyber units initiated a counterstrike on Russian and North Korean command networks. Firewalls collapsed under digital assault. Enemy targeting software froze. Entire batteries of Russian artillery went silent, paralyzed by electronic warfare. For the second time in less than a month, the enemy's offensive collapsed before it began. Across NATO channels, astonishment gave way to admiration. "They've learned faster than any army we've ever trained," said a British cyber officer in Warsaw. "They're running operations like a blue-water navy on land." Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Ukrainian troops advanced cautiously. They encountered scattered pockets of resistance, small units of Russian and North Korean soldiers cut off from command. Most surrendered quickly, confused and exhausted. By midday, the area was secure. Reporters embedded with Ukrainian units described the scene, destroyed drones littering the ground like locusts after a storm, and captured missile trucks abandoned with engines still running. The air was thick with smoke and the distant sound of victory. As word spread, the world began to take notice of a new kind of warfare. Analysts on the History Channel, CNN, and BBC all repeated the same observation. Ukraine had mastered the Navy mindset, meticulous coordination, flawless execution, and moral discipline in combat. Back in Washington, Admiral Wilkins was interviewed for an evening segment. When asked what impressed him most, he said, "It's their precision under pressure. The U.S. Navy operates with the belief that chaos can be defeated through order. Ukraine just proved that belief holds true, no matter the battlefield." In Pyongyang, state media went silent for several days. When broadcasts resumed, they avoided any mention of the losses. But satellite photos told the truth. North Korea had lost not only tanks but engineers, equipment, and valuable intelligence links. The joint venture with Moscow was crumbling. By late October, the Donbas front had stabilized. Ukraine held its lines, and the enemy's offensive capability had been crippled. In quiet moments, Ukrainian soldiers stood by the wrecks, reflecting on the strange alliance that had brought North Korean armor to their soil. One officer said, "They came from the far side of the world to die here." For what? His words echoed across the ranks, a reminder of how global politics could turn men into shadows of distant ambitions. As winter approached, the world began to understand that the war in Ukraine was no longer a regional conflict. It had become a proving ground for the future of warfare. Drones, cyber networks, precision artillery, and moral restraint, all operating together like instruments in an orchestra. International think tanks called it the Lysychansk Doctrine, a blend of American naval discipline and Ukrainian ingenuity. On November 5th, a small ceremony was held at a forward base. Survivors of the Silent Net operation received commendations. The atmosphere was somber but proud. Journalists asked Colonel Ivanenko what made his troops so effective. He replied simply, "We don't fight for revenge. We fight for precision and for life." The phrase became a slogan printed on posters across Kyiv. Precision and life. That night, a U.S. Navy destroyer sailing in the Mediterranean sent a coded message of solidarity to Ukraine's defense ministry. Fair winds and following seas. Strength and honor. The message was symbolic, but it meant everything. Two forces separated by oceans now shared the same code of conduct: courage, coordination, and humanity. As the months passed, the footage from the Battle of the 87 tanks continued to circulate online. Military academies across the world analyzed it frame by frame. They saw more than explosions, they saw evolution. The way Ukraine had turned technology into strategy, and strategy into survival. One historian described it best. This was the moment land warfare caught up with the sea. In war, there are battles of strength and battles of discipline, but the rarest victories are those won by both. On that September morning, Ukraine proved that precision is power, that honor is armor, and that the spirit of the U.S. Navy, measured, relentless, humane, can live on, even far from the sea. The Battle of Lysychansk will be remembered not only for its destruction, but for its order, not only for the tanks that burned, but for the humanity that survived.